Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Okay, in this segment we'll be dealing with one of the texts for African prose category. Now for your GCE, WAEC syllabus, 2 texts have been recommended for the African prose category. One is Lonely Days by Bayo Adebowale and the other is Faceless by Amadako. So now we'll be looking at background, setting, plot summary, themes, characters, language and style in this novel by Bayo Adebowale, Lonely Days. Now Lonely Days is a small novel. It's something that you can finish within a very short period. The language is very simple and straightforward. Now, what is this story about? Or let us look at the background and the setting of this story. Lonely Days is set in Kufi village. Kufi village, somewhere around Oyo State in Nigeria. It's a village in the southwestern Nigeria. Adeikpo village is a prominent village or a place that features in the narrative. Actually, Adeikpo village is the hometown of the writer Bayo Adebowale. Adeikpo in Yoruba means the crown has gone round or around. From a symbolic level of interpretation, we can say that in this novel, the author uses the name Adeikpo to emphasize the point that the crown of peace and happiness that came with Yaremi's marriage. Yaremi is the main character. The joy and peace that came with Yaremi's marriage to Ajumobi, who is her late husband, was replaced with a crown of thistles, thorns and sorrow after his death. Now, as the title implies, Lonely Days, we are looking at the story of a woman, a Yoruba woman in her mid-50s who loses her husband Ajumobi and the sorrows, the trauma that she has to face as a widow. Now, the story in general, is like a reflection of the trauma that widows go through, specifically in this part of the world, in Nigeria, in Africa. Now, a brief account of the plot. Yaremi is a widow. Ajumobi dies after an illness, leaving Yaremi to face the agonies of widowhood. So this woman, Yaremi, braces up the life as a widow. She begins to work to make money for herself. She devotes time to her farm and dyeing. That's she makes clothing. So she devotes her time to this. She braces up her life. She's a maker and seller of dyed clothes. And in order to ignore the fatigue of working at the dye yard, she has the company of her grandson, Woye, who is the son of Segi, her daughter. Now, because of the trauma that she faces, she portrays herself as a strong woman and decides to close ears to the gossips and the barbs from the other villagers. Now, even though Yaremi is in her mid-50s, she's portrayed as a very attractive woman. Ayonwale, the village drummer, tries to win her favor. There are some other men who are interested in marrying her, but Yaremi makes up her mind to stand alone. She makes up her mind to stand as a widow, to cherish the memory of her husband. Now, it should be noted that Lonely Days is set in a time where it is believed that a woman needs a man to survive in a typical African community. And now Yaremi stands as a figure that is opposing that. She believes that she does not need a man for support. She believes that she does not need a man to survive as a woman. Now, because during the cap picking ceremony, there is a place, a scene in the story where a cap picking ceremony is conducted. Now, the purpose of the cap picking ceremony is for widows to pick a particular cap belonging to any of the suitors. Now, that is symbolic that when you pick that cap, that automatically becomes the person that you are to marry. And at the end of the day, Yaremi forsakes the tradition, she forsakes the culture, and she goes home saying that she would always cherish her husband's memory. She would not remarry, and consequently she has to be banished from the village. But that aside, the novel also looks at the loneliness and the solitude that this woman has to face. Apart from Woye, her grandson, the company of her grandson who lives with her, and the children who visit her occasionally, Yaremi is a lonely woman. The loneliness is so intense, especially with the fact that she is alone in her reasoning. Apart from her children, nobody understands what she is going through, because culture and traditions are flung at her face. She is expected to subscribe to the cultures of her people. She is expected to remarry. She is expected to do some certain things. She goes through a lot of trauma. Her head is shaved. There are some other widows who also experience traumatic things because they are widows. Some of them were also accused of killing their husband. Some of them were accused of being the cause of their husband's death. So now the elders of Kufi pronounced a judgment on Yaremi for refusing to pick a cap during the ceremony. Thus, she is ostracized by the villagers, and they had to avoid her like a leper. Yaremi's punishment also includes the confiscation of her husband's property. Her property was confiscated. She's demoralized. She strips herself of her brocade and ipele, which circled her neck. Her eyes dim with tears of accumulated injustice, according to page 141. She, however, makes up her mind to stay strong to the end. She is determined to face the new challenges with courage and strength of mind, and has set her rights to self-determination and self-definition. Alright, at this point, we're going to look at the themes in this story. It's actually a very, very sad story, because it looks at some painful and traumatic experiences and aspects of womanhood. Now, the first theme and the major theme we'll be looking at here is the agony of widowhood. Lonely Days, as a novel, relates to the agonies and pains of widowhood. It shows the unjust widowhood rights and rituals of women, specifically within Nigeria and then in some parts in Africa. Yaremi and some other women, Fayoyin, Radeke, Dedewe, now they all suffer maltreatment and deprivations because they are widows. The loss of a loved one is demoralizing on its own. So you can imagine how painful it is for villagers and custodians of culture to come and impose some rights on these widows. Widows suffer discrimination and marginalization, and they are made to sing dirges, confess sins that they did not commit. Fayoyin, for instance, is made to lick libation and sing a dirge. The people sprinkle cold water on her head to make it easier for the barber to shave her hair. This is also a right that is also common. When a man dies, in some parts, the woman is expected to shave her hair, like shave it. The people sprinkle cold water on her head. Fayoyin's appearance is terribly altered for the hair shaving episode. Dedewe, another widow, is also made to confess sins in court. She is forced to sit beside her husband's corpse inside a dark room. The three widows, during a visit to Yaremi, tell her of how they sank deep into despair when they lost their husbands. Another thing, the widows state emphatically that they are subjugated people of the world with no hope and security. Now, we'll look at another theme. Of course, the title of the story is Lonely Days, so we cannot overlook the theme of loneliness and solitude in this story. The widow suffers loneliness and solitude. Now, you must note that Yaremi stands as a figure, a woman in Africa who is left alone to suffer because she does not embrace the ways of her people, the rights that are associated with widowhood. Now, Yaremi's case is especially pathetic because her children are now adults, and the children now live away, far away from her. So To combat loneliness, Yaremi makes Woye her grandchild. She makes him her companion. She tells him stories and they sing together. She recounts his care, his love and tenderness. She tends to the grave of her husband. She even dreams about him now to make up for the void that she feels. Now sometimes even she sees her late husband Ajimobi in her dreams because she is so emotionally tied to the husband. Yaremi's loneliness is heightened after her refusal to pick a cap during the ceremony. The villagers, after the incident, begin to avoid her. She is ostracized and they are reluctant to share pleasantries with her. Lonely Days, as a story or as a novel, is a testament to Yaremi's loneliness and the fact that loneliness or lonely days still lie ahead. Now, another thing we'll be looking at is the need for female empowerment. I believe this is what we tend to call feminism. I think in a way this story is a feminist story. Lonely Days relates to the urgent need for women to be freed from the shackles of parochial cultural traditions and male dominance that had subjugated many for long. The narrative or the story highlights the need for women to assert themselves despite challenges. Now, Yaremi's refusal to pick a cap during the ceremony explains this. Now, on her own, she is independent. She works. She is a businesswoman. She is a farmer, and she also dyes taffeta cloth. Imagine what would have happened, or imagine how the scenario would look like if Yaremi did not have finance. If she did not have a handwork or a means of livelihood to fall back on after her husband had died. Now imagine, she would have no choice but to marry one of these men that come to propose to her. So one of the reasons Yaremi does not want to become a wife to any of these men is because one of them, Lanwa, that is one of the suitors, uses his wife during the harvest season and sends them to their parents during the planting season. She declares that nobody can use me like a house help. Lanwa to peel tubers, slice banana chips on the wooden bench, in front of a lonely farmstead in the bush. This is Yaremi's statement in page 103. She is a woman who knows her rights and she is always ready to confront anyone who seeks to trample on her rights. Apparently, the only man who could understand her point of view was her late husband, Ajimobi, and sadly, she could not embrace or go into the arms of another man. Now, another thing we'll be looking at, the dignity of labor. Yaremi is a very hardworking woman. She treks a long distance to her husband's farm to uproot cassava for her goats feeding. She dries the maize in the sun. She makes and sells taffeta. She threshes bean seeds, tends cocoyam, stitches her old kilts. In fact, I believe I would want to say that Yaremi is the exemplary Proverbs 31 woman, according to the Bible. She is a woman who is diligent, even in the face of trauma, even in the face of so many challenges. Another thing we'll be looking at is the inevitability of death. Death is inevitable. It does not respect persons, status, color, tribe, or religion. Death, in a very ironical manner, is presented as an experience that is integral to the continued existence of the human race. Now, you find out that Yaremi could not help the death of her husband. There was nothing she could do. He had to go. Another thing we'll be looking at is the immortality of the dead. Immortality of the dead. As it is specifically believed in African traditions, they believe that when people die, there is a belief that their spirits tend to hover around us. For example, Ajumobi still feels the presence of her husband. I am very sure, I want to believe that Ajumobi's spirit and presence is part of what informed or influenced Yaremi's decisions concerning a second marriage, apart from the counsel from her children and her own personal decision. Ajumobi is portrayed to still care about his household even though he is dead. He appears to Yaremi in her dream and declares to her that he is not asleep. He also reminds her that he is the one responsible for helping her to accomplish very difficult tasks. He also reminded her of a time when he helped her to turn off the hurricane lamp when she was fast asleep in her room and was almost in the danger of catching fire. Alright, at this point we'll look at character and characterization of the people in the story, Lonely Days. First and foremost, our major character, our heroine, Yaremi. Of course, the role of Yaremi has already been emphasized in the plot of the story and the themes, but we'll still shed a little light. Of course, Yaremi is a feminist figure. She is independent. She is generous. In fact, she is such a good woman that in some instances where people come to patronize her and buy goods from her, sometimes they do not pay, yet she loves them equally. She does not hate her enemies. However, she stands as a figure that would not be swayed by culture or doctrine of her people. She is so devoted to her husband Ajumobi, even in death. She is devoted to her children. She delights in the company of her son, her grandson Woye. So Yaremi is portrayed as a very exemplary character. She's a dynamic character. She fought Ajumobi when he annoyed her while he was alive. So you can see the relationship between her and her husband. This points to the fact that humans can change and put on undesirable habits when provoked. Of course, she also had her weaknesses. Now, the next character we'll be looking at is Ajumobi, whom we didn't really meet in the story, but we are able to view Ajumobi's character via the use of flashback by the author. Ajumobi, during his lifetime, was averagely rich. He owned a cocoa farm, banana trees, and so many other enterprises. Yaremi addresses him as her very loving husband. Ajumobi is said to stammer whenever he is angry. He has also beaten Yaremi before. He once boasted of his plans to marry a new wife on a night when he was drinking palm wine with his friends. Of course, he was drunk at that time. Now, it must be noted that humans, characters, they also have flaws despite their strengths. Now, what is the significance of his character? Because Ajumobi is a loving husband and passionate, it is difficult for Yaremi to pick another husband because of the effect of Ajumobi's love to Yaremi. She cannot pick another husband. Yaremi vows that she would always stand by and love Ajumobi. Now we'll look at Woye. Woye is Ajumobi's grandson, Yaremi's grandson. I am not sure Woye met his grandfather. He is a companion to the grandmother. Because of Woye's innocence, he is the only one that is untouched by the sorrows of widowhood that pervades the atmosphere of the narrative. He continues to enjoy his life and play with his playmates. Of course, he was too young to understand what Yaremi was going through. Now, there are some minor characters in the story. There is Segi, Yaremi's daughter, who also influences her mother's decision not to take a second husband. There is Alani, Yaremi's only son, who lives in the city. Apart from him, every other character lives in the village. There is the other widows, Dedewe, Fayoyin, and Radeke, who are the other widows. Now, the difference between these three widows and Yaremi is that they accepted their fate. They accepted to go through the village rites. Apart from the village rites, they also accepted to go through with the cap picking ceremony and remarry as it was expected of them from the villagers. But Yaremi stands as a figure who refuses to be bamboozled by culture. So there is also other characters abound in the story. There are also the men, the suitors who want to marry Yaremi, Lanwa, Ayonwale, and one other character who wants to marry Yaremi for their own selfish interests. Now in this segment, lastly, we'll round off by examining the language and style used in this story. Now, Lonely Days consists of 14 chapters. The language of the narrative is very simple. There is also in the insertion of some Yoruba words, some Yoruba terms, because the setting, of course, is around the Yoruba speaking part, Kufi village, somewhere around Ibadan, Adeyipo, around Ibadan. The novel features a rich vocabulary on traditional life, hunting, farming, dyeing, wood carving, flute playing, and a host of others. Now, the point of view, Bayo Adebowale employs the third person omniscient point of view who knows all characters. The narrator knows even the thoughts and the plans of the characters. The reader learns about the characters and their experiences from what the narrator says and the characters in their dialogues. Another technique, or another thing we should note about the narrative and style is the use of flashback. Flashback is employed to supply the reader with the information about what happened in the past. For instance, we get to know about Ajumobi's relationship with his wife, Yaremi, through the use of flashback. Yaremi also reminisces. She thinks, and her thoughts are also helpful in filling the gaps that exist in the knowledge about Ajumobi, who had died 9 months before the actual narration of the story began. Other information about Yaremi's childhood and business are provided through a flashback to those experiences. Of course, there is the use of suspense. If you read through the cap picking ceremony, one is wondering what is to be expected at that scene. Because of the pressure, one would have thought that Yaremi would subject to embracing the culture and picking a husband